Hey everybody, welcome back to Advanced Kayak Angler Podcast. I appreciate y'all tuning in as always. Live from my mother-in-law's house. We're staying here while we're having our house built. Hopefully the internet holds up. If not, it'll be audio only. Just trying to test this out this week, so hopefully it's not too many issues. You can see all the Auburn stuff in the back, and there's an Auburn Christmas tree too. So definitely, Auburn over here. I don't have a whole lot of news this week. I just read that the Michigan State head football coach was fired because he sexually harassed the woman who does the sexual harassment training for the team. That's dummy of the week. If that's true, that's crazy. All right, that's it. Well, go ahead and get going here. All right, so welcome back to the show. We got Rus Snyders, man. Thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me on, Daniel.
Yeah, the man himself, having a great year as always. Right now, you're leading Bassmaster Angler of the Year, right?
I am, going into the fifth and final tournament of the year over in Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania in a few weeks. Looking forward to that one.
What? I don't know if Nick's going to it because he was on my he was on my team. I don't know if he's going or not. I haven't asked him. We were on the KFL team together at the Kingfishers.
Yeah. You guys had a good year this year too, huh?
Yeah, we won it last year. We didn't do it this year and do the new deal. But
I remember you won that one last year. You personally have had a pretty good year. I've seen you've been cashing some checks, winning a couple, and I'm happy for you, man.
Yeah, I'm not leading Bassmaster Angler of the Year, but next year my goal is to come out and fish them all. So
Cool.
We'll see what kind of schedule Steve puts up. But if anybody's looking for a housemate, holler at me. I know you're on that Dakota team, and you got the awesome truck set up. But if anybody, I think next year I'm gonna go. I really wanted to because the last couple of years I'm fishing some national stuff and the KFL stuff, and this year I want to take a step back, just do local. I felt like I had a couple of holes in my game, so I kind of wanted to fill those, and now I feel better after going back on the trail next year. So hopefully
Steve-O's doing a good job running it, and if you're going to commit to one, the Bassmaster is definitely a good one to commit to. I know I've heard a little bit of what the schedule is going to look like, and I'm definitely excited about it.
Heck yeah. My father-in-law actually, whose house he's passed away now, but he's the one that got me into bass fishing, and
Cool.
he won the bass. There's the local trail here. It's like Birmingham Bassmasters, and he has a whole room full of trophies. I mean, he's got me into it because I grew up saltwater fishing down on the coast in Biloxi. I moved up here and met my wife, and his partner had passed away, and it's like, I need a partner. And so I learned to bass fish. I had to learn real quick. But yeah, so I think just going out and fishing, and since he was part Bassmaster, giving it a shot for Germany. So we'll see what happens.
Cool. I'm excited to see. I'm sure
I'll be humbled, but I'll give it a shot.
Yeah, you've been holding your own in a lot of these tournaments. I'm sure you're going to do just fine. You did a lot of red fishing and sea trout and inshore fishing on the coast.
Because I'm from Biloxi, you have to go 15 miles out to actually hit anything more deeper than 15 feet from Biloxi. You either have to, because if you're looking at a map, you have the horseshoe from Venice, Louisiana, and we would go 22 miles out in my dad's 18-foot center console, handmade in Louisiana, just a little cheap.
That's a long ride for a boat that size.
Yeah, a 90-horse Johnson. We would go so far south that we would hit Louisiana. We would be in Louisiana waters. Because whenever you go straight out from Biloxi, Mississippi, you eventually hit Louisiana water. And but the fishing's not so good in Mississippi. It's unbelievable in Louisiana. We would drive 2 hours over south of New Orleans and Chalmette, and I don't even want to say some of the other towns because they're so good, but some of those other places. If anybody knows where End of the World ramp, and you can look it up. Down there, if you really care, and
cool.
it would take longer to drive to there than it would to limit out with 5 redfish and 20 speckled trout a piece.
I've
Like,
still been wanting to
listen,
go to that area. I've been to Pensacola, but never that section of Louisiana there. But I know a lot of that fishing translates over to bass fishing so much. It's,
yeah,
I've talked to quite a few guys that have made that transition to that, sea the trout and the redfish and flounder, all that inshore stuff in the
yeah.
Gulf, and transition into the bass. Garrett Wade is another good example. He's done a lot of that stuff too.
Yeah, and Dustin, I mean, you can look at Dustin Nichols down in Texas.
Hmm.
He competes on both, and he's great at both.
Yeah, Matthew Van is another one, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun doing that. It's cool. You got to grow up doing that kind of fishing.
yeah, it's a lot simpler. Like we didn't get, my dad. He only fished to eat. He didn't eat. He didn't fish for the sport of it. So like he has never went bass fishing with me at all. Like he won't.
Really?
Sport fishing just doesn't make sense to him. He's too practical for that. But but yeah.
Oh, you said your
So
father-in-law is the one that did a lot of the bass fishing.
yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Hey, did you fish a lot of saltwater out in California growing up?
I did, yeah. It's a lot different than the saltwater fishing out in the Gulf.
Yeah.
My dad had it was more of like a little cuddy cabin kind of family boat, but we go out the gate and
Yeah.
do salmon fishing, halibut. There's some islands that are about 25 miles out of the gate called the Farallon Islands. So we go out there and go for rockfish and lingcod and bottom fish type of stuff, which a lot of that's pretty similar to offshore structure bass fishing, just finding the little
Vertical
edges and
jigging and
vertical jigging, a lot of that stuff. So reading your electronics and in the bay I did a lot of like striper fishing. The stripers, they when out on the beach, I do surf fishing for those. They come in the bay and then they go all the way up into the California Delta, which is where I spend a lot of time doing a lot of bass fishing there as well
yeah.
growing up. But a little bit of everything. That's a nice thing about living where I did. You got a kind of taste of everything with the saltwater, freshwater, some of the fly fishing up in the Sierras and stuff. So I like it
Yeah.
all for sure.
The like the last time I used to be really into wade fishing, and we would go out to the islands. 12 miles out, they have islands, and one of them there's actually a like a Civil War fort. And
Oh,
it's
cool.
it's called Ship Island. You can go out there and do a tour. If anybody ever goes to Biloxi, the beaches are not man-made. I mean, they're man-made. They're not natural. They used to be cypress trees. But you can take a ferry boat out to the islands, and it's beautiful. Nobody's out there. It's like Panama City, but nobody's there. I mean, it's really is amazing out there. But
Cool.
I used to wade fish. We would go out there and then wade fish around the island. Last time I went, you would have a floating stringer on you that would go out, go a ways out from you. And I had a bunch of fish on it. Now I got schooled up by a bunch of sharks, and they were
Mhm.
like eating a fish off my stringer, and I was hitting my rod. Like you can only scare them off so long before they
I would have
eventually.
just cut the stringer at that point.
Yeah, well, they ate
That
all the
sounds
fish, and
crazy.
then
I bet.
they saw.
Yeah.
Yeah, that when once all the blood was in the water, they still saw me. So I mean, they were coming after me. So I've never been again.
Need
But
a metal basket maybe.
yeah, that was it. That was enough. All
Yeah.
right. So the reason we got you on, why I got you on, is to talk. First, we'll talk about top waters because I'm really interesting. I'm really interested. Like how much about all what's your first like what categories of top waters do you normally bring in the kayak?
I I use just about all different kinds of top
Do
water
you really?
from buzz baits, wake baits. I mean, if we're gonna pick them all apart, I guess buzz baits, wake baits, frogs, and even frogs. You can subcategories into hollow belly frogs and like the horny toads or the soft
Toads,
plastic
yeah.
frog toads. Um, Poppers, spooks. And there's different kind of categories of the spooks, like the pencil poppers. There's a
Hmm.
few different varieties of those walking baits.
Splashers,
Yeah.
yeah. Chuggers,
Then whopper ploppers. So it's a pretty broad category, and I think just
yeah.
kind of talking about when I throw each kind of top water has its time and place, depending on a number of things, whether there's, vegetation or not. Like a buzzbait or frog will go through better vegetation, or if they're schooling fish, where I'm gonna, work a top water a little faster, or something, like if I'm just kind of target orientated, casting the sides of docks or something like that, might use a little popper. So yeah, I think it'd be kind of fun just to go over all the different categories, the rods, the reels, the line that I throw them on, and just kind of when and where I like throwing each of those baits.
Well, listen, how about poppers? We'll start there.
Okay, poppers.
Because that's one I'm actually like, I understand, when you're supposed to throw them, where you're supposed to throw them. It seems like it's not a bait I ever have a lot of success with, though.
Okay, yeah, poppers are good, especially. I mean, there's a number of different places to throw them. I said the time I'm most likely to throw them, it's more of a finesse bait. It's something I'm gonna twitch it and let it sit for a little bit. Um, not trying to really cover a lot of water, but really hit those little ambush points or targets where you know that they're sitting. It's also a bait that's going to be good during a shad spawn or something like that. When you can
Yeah.
really match something. It's a topwater that's a little smaller in size and profile. I mean, they make bigger poppers too, but for the most part, the poppers I like throwing, Yellow Magic is a really good one, and then the Strike King makes a good little popper. I've got a few of those. Another good popper is a River to Sea Bubble Pop. They make like three different sizes. I like the medium size, not the short fat one, but the one that's might be the bigger one. It's a little bit longer. That's a good one if there's a little bit of wind on the water, and it throws out a really good pop. If it's not as finessey as like a Yellow Magic is.
Why
Yellow
why why
Magic's
why
kind of
yellow why yellow magic?
it's pretty similar. It just has like that's one KVD. He turned me on. I mean, he
Oh, is it?
started throwing
Oh,
that
okay.
a long time ago, back in the day. He's the one who kind of, yeah, who I heard about using it, and a few of the other elite guys were using that Yellow Magic, and it's something that's really similar to like the Rico or the.
Hmm.
It's just about getting just that right pop. Where a lot of times I don't like it to bubble over. I like it to spit water rather than do. Sometimes you use poppers and it'll kind of just like
Bloop,
boom
bloop.
like that,
Yeah.
and it'll like create like a big bubble. I like the ones that spit water just a little bit more.
Oh.
And usually when I'm using a popper, I'm throwing on a lighter rod uh, with braid. Almost all my top water I throw with braid. Sometimes I'll throw a braid to leader. With that one, I actually like a small popper. I like throwing my jerk bait rod, which is a 6'10" or 6'9" eye rod. I forget what the model number is, but it's just a really really light rod. I'll throw it with like 20-pound braid, and a lot of times I'll put a leader, like a 12-pound mono leader. Whenever I do use a leader for top water, I always like mono instead of fluorocarbons because mono floats, fluorocarbon will sink. Um, so I like using a mono leader. One, so especially if the water's clear, the fish can't see it as well. But also it adds just a little bit of absorption. Having that mono will just stretch just a little bit, and as you're fighting the fish, that'll make a big difference too. You'll lose, I think, a few less fish by having that mono leader as opposed to just going straight braid.
Are you using straight braid on your jerk baits or just up
I'd
to
use
your leader?
braid to fluorocarbon on jerk
Yeah,
baits
okay.
or straight fluoro. It depends on
Gotcha.
yeah, just how long I'm trying to cast. A lot of times with the fluorocarbon on a long cast, you can get like a sharper, more erratic action. So I like that braid to fluoro. So if I
Hmm.
really need that sharp action, I'll switch to the braid. And sometimes if the water's really really clear, though, that braid, even though you have a little bit of a leader, sometimes I'll go just with the straight fluorocarbon, especially if I'm trying to get the jerk bait a little deeper, and that I'm working it slower. That fluorocarbon will sink a little bit, but yeah. Anyways, let's talk about top
Sorry,
water. Don't
I
get
didn't mean to
carried
back
away.
up. Yeah.
um, yeah, so that's I don't know what else I could say about throwing a popper. Those are a few of my favorite ones. Typically throw 20-pound braid. Sometimes if I'm throwing the River to Sea Bubble Pop, I'll probably use 30-pound braid. Sometimes I'll go straight braid. A lot of times though, I really do like having just a little bit of a mono leader, either 12 to 15 pound.
Okay. So I guess a step up from there would be walking baits, spooks, things like that.
Yeah. So with spook, I mean, they could make a few different sizes. I use everything from, I mean, a lot goes into that category as far as a spook. There's RS Super Spook is kind of the standard, and then they make other baits. Oh, did I lose you? I'll just keep talking. I think he's gone. So they make other baits like Reaction Innovations Vixen is a really popular one. And then Lucky Craft Gunfish is another kind of hybrid between a walking bait and a pencil popper. It has a little bit of a cupped lip, but all those walking baits kind of have their own purpose. The spook I think all work when they really want a slow retrieve, and I'm just like really giving it hard walks and then just letting it sit there. You can really get it to walk in place pretty good on a super spook, or a spook junior is another one if I want a little smaller profile. The Vixen is something that I'm going to work a little bit faster. It doesn't have as hard of a knock going back and forth. It's a little different pitch noise, a little higher pitch noise, and it's something that I'll throw, if there's a little bit of wind on the water, and something that will, still call fish up. It's got does make a lot of noise, and it'll call fish up from a little bit deeper water. I've used it a lot in like really clear water when the fish are, coming down from 10, 15 feet deep. That Vixen's a good one. Another walking bait that I mentioned is the Gunfish, and made by Lucky Craft. I really like that one when. Oh, you there?
Sorry, I was back there. I just didn't bring myself back in. My,
Okay, I just kept
my
talking.
bad, man. I was listening to you.
All right.
Why all the hype around the Vixen? Is it not the new one, just the old one?
I have some. I remember I bought a bunch of those when they first came out. Man, I bought a bunch of them, and some of them I sold. At one point, I was getting like $75 a piece for those things because I still had them in the package and all that. And then somebody knocked them off, and not. Yeah, they made another one, but I guess it wasn't quite the same as some of the old ones. And now I heard the new one is supposedly like just like the original that people have been liking, but it's a good walking bait where you can work it a little bit faster than a spook. I'm not typically using it too much on schooling fish. It's more for I like that bait for calling fish out of a little bit deeper water, especially if I'm around clear water. I'll walk it a few times. I'll kind of do a few hard walks, a few fast ones, and then let it pause. It can kind of do a lot of different things, but it still sits nice and level when you pause it. And then there's other walking baits would be like the Lucky Craft Sammy is one that I used to use a lot
That's
more. I don't
great.
use it quite as much, but that's a bait where when you stop it, it doesn't sit level horizontal like this. The tail end will kind of sit down. So because of that's a type of bait where you really want to just keep it moving, keep it walking, and don't let the fish get a good look at it. I don't use that as much. I tend to use the gunfish instead in that circumstance more than the Sammy. That's a bait I really like for schooling fish. It casts really well for its size. It's still a pretty small profile. It has a little bit of a cupped lip where it spits a little bit of water, and it's almost like a pencil popper. It's really a cross between like a spook and a pencil popper. And I like that gunfish quite a bit when they're schooling and there's just a little either calm or just a little bit of wind. If it does get a little too windy, like the wind kicks up a notch, that's when I like going to the actual pencil poppers, like the evergreen shower blow,
Yeah.
or what's the other one? It's called The One. Is that Reaction Innovations? I don't know.
Yeah.
No, it's
Now the
Paycheck
Vixen
Baits.
makes
That's an old one.
yeah. I guess one of my questions is there's so many different categories, there's so many different colors, there's so many different rattles.
Mm-hmm.
How in the world do you know what to carry, which ones to carry? Like, do you have a sound like one knocker, regular knocker, sound
Yeah,
list?
sometimes the another
Yeah.
good one is the one knocker. It's not the super spook. It's just a one knocker spook. It's a little bit smaller than the super spook, which is
Yeah.
it's a good size. The super spook's a little big. I've caught a lot of fish on it, but I haven't actually don't throw it as much as I used to. But that, that one knocker is a really good one. Sometimes it's just the sound, it's a certain sound they'll key into, and a lot of it's just like trying different lures. If they're on a topwater bite, I'll switch lures a lot and just keep changing things up until I find something they like. But a lot of times, just looking at the conditions, I at least have a few baits that I know. Okay, it's going to be like one of these. As far as, like I said, with the wind, or where I'm throwing it, or the size of the bait, are all kind of things that I can,
Yeah.
just from being time on the water and kind of knowing, the conditions and what has worked in the past, I guess.
What about colors? And you're just trying to match the hatch, or
Not always.
sun up?
I keep it pretty simple, because they're just looking up at the bait, and really the only color you need, something with a white belly. I'll have something with a white belly. A chrome can be a good one. Something that's really
Yeah.
flashy, like a chrome, has a lot of reflectiveness. Something that's transparent, where you can really see through the bait quite a bit, especially in really clear water. And then I'd say a bluegill pattern, especially in summertime with a lot of topwater. I really like throwing bluegill pattern topwaters. And then another thing would be just like a black, like a silhouette or a black. And I don't think you don't really need anything more than that. You can keep it pretty simple.
All right. So, is there anything we missed in that category, or what's next, I guess?
I guess with the walking baits, I do usually step it up with either 30 to 40 pound braid, a little
Yeah.
bit longer rod. I like a iRod Lone Star Special, which is a 7'3", like medium power, or my signature series Snyders Sniper, with like 40 pound braid, for some of the bigger top waters, like a Super Spook or even a Vixen. The gun, you can throw it with a gunfish too. Um,
So, and that's just to get a longer cast, but you still
Yeah,
want to be
longer
careful
casts,
with
and
wind.
it's pretty much rule of thumb for me is, yeah, a lot of times, even if you're throwing the same bait, I don't have a certain rod for that certain bait. It'll depend on where I'm fishing that bait. Like if I'm throwing, say I'm throwing a gunfish or something like that, and making bombing, fish are busting, and I'm bombing long casts, I'm going to use a rod like my Snyder Sniper, which is a 7'5". And if I'm throwing that same bait, just going down the bank, throwing it on the edges of laydowns and stuff like that, 7'5" is going to be too long. I'll go something closer to a 7 foot rod, for that. And so, yeah, it just depends on where you're fishing it, whether it's making long casts on grass flats or busting fish, or if you're, targeting ambush points and stuff like that and need to do short, accurate casts, then I'm going to use a shorter rod. But no matter what, on a top water, especially with treble hooks, especially with using braid, you're going to want something with a really soft tip.
Some give, yeah.
Yeah. I'd even
So
use
not
like, if I was using, doing really short casts around laydowns, I'll even use like a crankbait rod, like a seven
Yeah.
foot crankbait, and a glass rod, or composite. Really, the one I'd use would be a composite, 7 foot if I was doing short casts with a smaller top water. If it's really small, like a little poppers, when I use my jerkbait rod. But yeah.
not to go off topic, but how many? It sounds like you do a lot of braid to fluoro. How many different spools of uh, short line? God, brain fart. But the leader line. Good Lord. How many spools? How much leader line? Different kinds of leader line are you bringing?
I bring quite a bit. What I do actually, it's a cool little trick. I did a little video at some point on my Facebook or Instagram, but I have all these little like sample spools that are about this size. I'm trying to see if I have any right here. I don't know. They're about this size, and they just came with like 100 yards of line. I had a whole pack of them at one point when I was done using that. I kept those little spools, And when I buy fluorocarbon or line in general, I actually buy the big giant bulk spools, but I'm not going to want to take those on my kayak with me. So what I do is I keep these small little sample spools, and I get a drill and I get a screwdriver where the head, like the handle part of the screwdriver, fits into the hole of the spool, and then I put the metal part into the drill, and then I'll just use the drill and I'll fill it from those big bulk spools that I have. So I just load those up with leader line, and I got, I don't know, about a dozen of them or so, and I'll only put 30, 40 yards on each of those little spools. And I usually carry all fluorocarbon from 6 to 25 pound, and for the mono I'll usually carry 12, 15, and 17 pound mono.
Wow. So you really do carry a lot out there.
A lot of line, yeah, but it's all about just putting it on those smaller spools for leader line. Yeah, like I said, with that drill, using that drill. Otherwise, you're just trying to like wind it on. I just like that, and it'll just spin super fast and load that line on that little spare spool. To hold them all together, I use one of those rubberized, like the little bendable rubberized.
The night eye steel.
Where are they? Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, that's it. I'll use those and just kind of load it through, and be able to take them off really easy.
Well, there you go. Rus Snyders bringing more leader than you are on the kayak. Secret. We finally found your secret. There it is.
That's it.
All right. So poppers, walkers. Now my favorite. Ploppers, choppos. Which one? Chopper.
Both. I've been
Choppo
messing
or plopper?
with both of them. Both of them are good. I've used all different sizes, and I wouldn't say. I've caught a lot of fish on whopper ploppers and choppos, but I wouldn't say it's always my go-to. I'm starting to really get a feel of when and where I like them, and it's usually when I want to cover water, and they're keyed in to that steady movement, as opposed to sometimes they want something more erratic, like a walking bait or something that's moving a little, moving like that. And then sometimes that slow, medium paced, up, like that the ploppers do. And in either scenario, I always like throwing the whopper poppers when there's a little bit of chop on the water. Usually the bigger the chop, the bigger the bait I'm going to use. If it's pretty calm, I'm typically using a smaller size whopper popper or chopo.
Like the
same
75,
thing.
a little bitty one?
I use that. I like the 7. I don't know that. What's the short fat one? That's the itty bitty one, the 75, right? Okay, that's the kind of short, fatter one. Yeah, that's a good one. I like that one a lot. It makes a little bit more noise. And pop, it's similar to the 90, I guess is the next size, right?
The 90 is longer, like the other ones.
It's a little longer, a little more finesse. That short one, the 75, has a little bit more thump, but a little bit smaller size. So both of those, I'll go back and forth between. I don't know if there's a time, I could say, this one better in this circumstance or this one better. It just kind of depend. Maybe, if the water's a little bit dirtier, I'd say that 75 might be a little bit better just because it makes a little bit more noise. Where that 90 I'm going to use when it's pretty calm or finesse. That's a good one for smallmouth too, or if you're in rivers and stuff like that. I like the 90, and I've used the 75, but as the forage gets bigger or there's a little more chop, if there's like a little 6-inch chop in the water, that little 75 or 90 just isn't going to call them up good enough. You're going to want to use, was it the 110 or something in that range, or even the big one.
Do you have any sneaky alterations? I've heard people doing a few different things to ploppers and choppos.
No, I haven't. What are some of the things that you've heard they've done?
I'll tell you later. I can't.
Okay.
I was sworn to secrecy.
All right. That's a bait though that you can.
I've never done it. What do I know?
I'll throw that one just on straight floor. That's straight fluorocarbon you can use for the whopper poppers, just because you are constantly moving it, and it doesn't matter. Sometimes you stop it too. There are times where, especially with that smaller one, where I'll just almost work it like a popper, and I'll just like bloop, 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 like that. I guess then
I found the same thing. The 75 works really great, like almost as a like you're saying, almost like a popper too.
yeah, the smaller sized ones. I can't say that I've had that many times on the bigger size Whopper poppers where I'm just popping it like that. But with the smaller size ones, it can work good with that retrieve.
Yeah. All right. So what is that still going to be like a 7.2, 7.3,
Yeah,
somewhere around
softer,
there?
especially if you're using braid, just having a little bit softer tip on the rod and pretty similar rods and stuff that I'd use for the walking baits, I'd say.
Yeah. So I mean, just that if anybody's just getting into fishing, like Russ was saying earlier, you really have to have something where if you don't have a lot given your line and you're using braid, you have to go with a softer rod,
Yeah,
especially with a
especially with
hooked
braid.
bait. Like, yeah,
Especially with treble hooks. And a lot of it's just you want that rod to load up really nice on the cast. But not only that is once you hook the fish or the fish bites, you don't want something too stiff where it's going to pull it out of their mouth. That's another reason why sometimes having a mono leader can be nice. And then also when you're fighting fish, anytime you have treble hooks and you're fighting a fish and they're jumping, if the rod's too stiff, especially if you have braid, it could be a little easier for them to throw that bait as well. So
okay. The all right, so we got now buzz baits. That's probably my favorite one. I haven't found it. I really want to hear your thoughts on like skirted, toad, like all that. Tell me about your buzz baits, man.
I make my own buzz baits. I keep it pretty simple on them. I get my heads and the components from Cast Industries, and they, you can kind of customize. There's one right here. There's some heads too. Didn't even plan on it. It's the buzzbait heads that I use, and I get it with a really heavy, stiff wire. This is actually like the heaviest wire that you can get. Unlike a
Wow.
spinner bait where you actually want a light wire because you're getting a lot of vibration from that wire. The buzz baits, it doesn't matter. You don't need the light wire. I want something as heavy as possible and something with a flat kind of head like that where it's going to ride up through grass. It'll help plane it out like a little bit easier. I use everything from, so here's a quarter, 3/8 to half ounce, and having the head match with the blade size is really important. If it's too big of a blade on too light of a head, it's going to tend to roll over too easy.
Mhm.
You want that blade to stay right, right on top of the hook. You don't. If it gets a little bit off, it's okay, but you don't want it to start to where it's like rolling over like that. And if the blade's too big for the weight of the head, that'll happen. And then if the blade's too small, then you're just going to have problems with it. Uh, you're going to have problems with it riding on the surface.
Yeah.
Uh, so, so yeah, you want to really balance that blade with the head. And typically I just use the just two prong, like, let's see if I
Do you
have
ever
it in
throw a
here.
double blade?
I do. I have before. They make so many different types of blades, but I throw those double like clacker ones where they kind of clack against each
Yeah, yeah.
other. They also make a double blade where there's like a blade inside of a blade. That one's cool too. They make like a four-wing plastic blade. Oh, here
Yeah,
they are.
I've never used a plastic blade.
I don't. Do we even have video right now, or are we just doing audio?
No, no, you're still video.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, this is one of the blades I use a
Hey, you're
lot. It's
better at
kind of
look at than me, anyways.
my standard
Yeah.
blade, and this is actually where the wire. They make one where the wire goes through. Let's see, make one where the wire goes through the middle of it right here, so it actually goes in both sides. It's on this side, and it's on that side.
Uh,
If you could see that. Then they
is
make
that
like an
better?
off.
Is that just for more squeak? You want that one?
The squeak really is about where this piece right
The
here is
rivet.
rubbing
Yeah.
against the rivet right there, and also like yeah, where it goes through this, it'll rub on this and create some squeak out of that as well. This is probably my most common blade that I use. They also make like plastic ones if you want something that just really goes slow. These little four-winged plastic ones are pretty cool. You can They have clackers. They have, all sorts of different things. Let me see if I can find the one that is an off center. They also make one where it's, there we go. Got it. There we go. They make an off center one too, and this one has more of like a thump to it, where the wire is on
one
it
side.
doesn't go
Yeah.
through the middle, it just stays on one side of the blade like that. But yeah, for the most part, the 3/8 with this pretty standard blade, you see it on a lot of them. It's pretty common. That one works. I'd say this is the one I'd use the most. But the most important thing with the buzzbait is just getting the squeak and getting the sound, and bending the wire a lot of times too. A lot of times I'll bend it so it's sitting, so it has the lower part has a bend like that to it, and I move this up just about like that, and then if it's running off center, one thing that you can do is kind of bend the wire one way. I don't know if you can see that or not, one way or the other way. That's an important thing. Like if it's running a little bit on its side, you can, move it just like that, and then that'll
Left
kind of
or right.
correct itself. Yeah, where it's gonna, where that head's gonna be directly underneath the blade. So those little.
What about the buzz baits that they kind of have the offset in the wire? Is that like
this one where it's on
no,
the
like
blade?
in the actual wire, it'll drop down. I wish I had a picture of one here. Like yours,
wire.
you just have a
Like
straight wire.
it comes out and then goes up and stuff. Yeah, I've seen some of
Yeah.
the. I don't know. They work too. With some old rod strainer spinner baits are made like that. A few other ones. This one's a pretty I throw this one. I'd say this the 3/8 and the 1/4 ounce. 90% of the time now, I've caught so many fish on it. I've got a lot of confidence in it, and as long as it's got that nice sound to it where it's squeaking a lot, it works. And I'll use skirts, and I'll use toads as well. I like toads a lot better. I guess the only time I really would throw a toad instead of a skirt is if I need to skip it, whether it be underneath trees or underneath docks. If you put a toad on the back of it, it skips a heck of a lot better. If you just try to skip a buzzbait that has a skirt on it, you can't really. So,
I'm really not, if I'm going to be skipping, I'm going to go to something else like a swim jig. It seems like I'm usually not going to skip a buzzbait too much. I know that's a thing.
You could do it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times where you're around trees and stuff like that, and just skipping it under trees, it'll skip pretty good with a toad on the back of it. And I'd say probably over 80% of the time, I'm just using the skirt instead of the toad. But there's time where that works. There's times I'll throw just like a little, like a little dipper on the back of a 1/4 ounce one as well, or like a small swim bait. And that's typically good for smallmouth or spotted bass and like clear waters when I typically do that.
Are you usually going to more like a paddle tail, like a beaver, but it actually kicks most of the time? Whenever you have a skirt or no plastic?
I use either, I say it again with the.
Well, whenever you have a skirted buzz bait and you're not doing the toad, what kind of trailers besides a swim bait are you using?
I typically either use just the skirt, or I put on no skirt with just a swim bait. I don't
Oh, okay.
use too many. I don't use too many skirted buzz baits with trailers. I've tried that before, and for some reason it bogs it down some, or I don't know, just at least
Yeah.
on the ones that I make, when I put a trailer on it, it just doesn't squeak as good or sound as good. It wants to ride a little bit lower with the skirt and the trailer on there. So I typically just use the skirt, and it works. Definitely, it works just fine with the
Well, I
skirt.
feel better because I've never been able to find the right bait to do that combo. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong I throw a lot of buzz baits, and I've tried the skirt with a plastic, and it's like it never works correctly.
Yeah, it always typically it messes it up. Not to say that there isn't like a combination where it's balanced right to do that, but at least for
Yeah.
the buzz baits that I make that I throw a lot, um, once I put a trailer on there, it just doesn't work the same. A
So,
Largo shad. Now that I'm thinking of it, another swim bait.
yeah,
If you're just throwing a straight swim bait, that Storm, what was it, Largo shad? That's a
yeah.
really good one too for a buzz bait.
Uh, I I know Justin Jacob Wheeler used to like that one a lot.
Cool.
So like in the fall, you're probably going to go to a swim bait more.
Um, yeah, it just depends. Most times I just go with the skirt, and like I said, if I'm going spotted bass or smallmouth, then and the water's pretty clear, then I'll put a swim bait on there. Or if they're really, really keyed on shad, or if they're just, I could tell it's a topwater bite, but they're just not liking the skirt, then I'll start mixing it up with that. As far as just using like a horny toad is a really popular one on the back, like a black horny toad on a buzz bait is a
Yeah.
really good lure. And I'll throw that too from time to time. But I'll always start out with just the skirt, and if for some reason like I'm needing to skip it more, or they just want a little different profile, or I feel like then I'll switch to the horny toad on the back or top, any of those kind of toads.
Yeah. The Okay. Well, again, a buzzbait is one of those things where you could have just a infinite amount of combinations. Is there any kind of advice you give to people on, like which ones are the primaries, I guess?
Black, a little bit of red, and a gold blade. That's that's
Ah.
that's what I like. I caught a lot of
Black
fish on one.
blade?
Gold blade, no, black and red skirt, black with just a little few strands of red, with a
Uh-huh.
gold blade is probably what I throw over half the time. Anyways, if they're on a shad bite, if they're on bait fish or shad or something like that, then I'll throw the whites. Black, white. I actually throw like a little bluegill skirted buzz
Yeah.
bait. It's been doing pretty good. But either black or shad or sometimes a little bluegilly one. That's about all you need for that. Or yeah, you can keep it pretty simple with a buzz bait.
Why gold blade instead of like a black blade?
I've tried it with a black blade too, and it works. But I've caught more fish on a black and red buzz bait
Uh,
with a gold blade than any other buzz bait by a lot. Big fish, a lot of big fish on that bait.
See, I think I just go with a chrome blade on everything. Maybe it's, I don't know.
I don't know. They eat it. That's for sure.
That, that's why you're leading angler of the year, and I'm just a dude at his mom's house. All right, so now frogs, like everybody's favorite. What Oh no, we didn't talk about rods.
With the buzzbait, pretty similar rods. I like the Lone Star Special 7'3" medium for with 30-pound braid for my quarter-ounce buzzbaits, and for my 3/8 and half, I'll use my signature series Snyder Sniper with 40-pound braid.
And when are you going to a quarter ounce? More that fall
Just
bite, or is it?
profile, both. The water's a little bit clearer, or just a little more finessey, or just the sound. If the water's a little clear, yeah, mostly on like a lot of it's on water clarity. I'd say if the water's a little more pretty stained, I'll go more with the 3/8 to make a little more noise, and it's a little clearer, I'll go with the quarter. Unless it's like if it's
Okay.
stained, it's like really shallow water or something like that, then I'll probably go with the quarter.
You're, I mean, after a few different things that you've went over, you're very into like whenever I mean, I knew this too, but fish in clear water, you really don't want them to get a good look at something.
Yeah, you're gonna scale down. You're gonna, or you could, they'll eat really big swim baits in clear water too. So I guess it can go both ways. But typically if the water's clear, yeah, with at least topwater baits, a lot of times I'll scale down, use stuff that's a little smaller, more finessey,
And
but
or like more translucent and moving it a little
more
quicker.
transparent, moving a little quicker, all that. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay. I mean, it's sometimes easy to forget those simple things like that, and you know,
Yeah.
just having hear you say that, it's like, oh yeah, I need to pay more attention to it for sure. All right, so frogs. I don't know how you're carrying. How much gear do you carry on that
A lot. I
wilderness? A
carry a
lot,
lot
huh?
in my truck. Like fill my black pack, my Yak Attack black pack. I fill up, and sometimes I have a little bit extra room for like plastics in my cooler, and I also have a front hatch that I'll put some stuff in. But most of my stuff I carry, yeah, just in my truck or at wherever I'm staying. I carry a lot of gear, and it's like a daily thing. A lot of times where, I'll fish one area, and the conditions will be one way, the clarity or whatever, and then the next day I got to go fish a different part of the lake, and I'll unload half of the stuff out of my Yak Attack black pack, and then reload it with a bunch of new stuff, on a pretty daily basis. And just being really organized is really helps for sure. It's a little
Yeah,
different when you're in a bass boat and you can just carry all your stuff just like right there. It's one thing about kayak fishing is you're kind of limited on how much gear you can bring, and I like throwing just such a variety of different baits. Uh, you know, I yeah. So it's always a struggle for sure to get the right stuff in my kayak for the day.
yeah. All right, so frogs. But do you have a go-to? What's your number one? Like, if you had to pull one out of the box, what's that frog?
Probably would have been one of the original like snag proof frogs. I do a bunch of modifications to them to kind of make them just how I like them. But there's so many new frogs out these days that I can't say that the old tried and true old snag proof that I have is works any better than some of these new ones that like the jackal Cara frog. That's a really good small one. The Spro popping frogs, all the Spro frogs really are really good. They make a really big one. I forget what it's called. Cody was just showing me that one. I was
Like the
fishing
king
next to him.
frog?
Yeah, that one's pretty good. I got to get a couple of those. Those are pretty, I can see how that works good, especially on like mats and stuff.
Yeah.
But
Just keep it down a little bit deeper, like the
yeah,
weight of it, I guess.
they could just feel just through it just moves more water and stuff, and that's a good one for
Yeah.
fishing a lot of that duckweed and matted vegetation. And I don't do like I try to avoid frog fishing on like really thick, heavy, matted stuff where they have to
Yeah.
come through it.
Just the
Um,
hookup ratio is so
it
bad.
sucks. Yeah, it sucks. Not to say you can't catch giant fish doing that, and I have caught some giant fish doing that, but it's just for tournament
Heartbreaker.
fishing. It can be a heartbreaker more times than not.
Yeah.
Where I really like throwing a frog is doing, and you really break frog fishing down into like two categories. Even doing that, heavy slop, heavy vegetation, matted type stuff. Where especially if you're doing long casts, you need a heavy like beefy rod for one
Yeah.
getting a good hook set, and most of all pulling them through all that stuff. But the frog fishing I like doing is more just skipping under trees in and around laydowns, around docks and stuff like that. More kind of like what Dean Rojas, from the old days
Yeah.
of the style of frog fishing that he did is more what I'm about. For that, you can use a pretty light rod. Doesn't I'll use it with 50-pound braid, but something that has a light enough tip and a heavier backbone. And I don't have an actual eye rod that I could say I love for frog fishing for that really short cast tight quarters. I've been liking my signature series rod, 7'5", kind of gets it done with especially some of those smaller frogs and stuff. I'd have to think of what rod I would throw. I haven't done a lot of frog fishing lately, but
Season's coming.
yeah, but like a
Yeah.
7 foot, I'll use a lot of times for that shorter stuff. I'll use like a 7 foot frog rod. I know Ron Champion has his signature series iRod frog rod. It's a 7/8, and that one's definitely more designed for like big
A
mats and
Mac.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I believe they have a new frog rod. I just don't have it yet, but it's actually for more of that finesse frogging or short casting, more in like open water. And I typically always use 50-pound braid. If it's really, really heavy covered matted vegetation with really big fish, then you can go with 65. But typically 55 or 50-pound, like across the board, is pretty standard for a frog. And if you are doing it where, you are walking it and working it and stuff, like those little popping frogs, spro popping frogs, the Cara frogs, or any of that, something with a really light tip is, I really believe in like a lighter rod than I'd say most people. And you'd be surprised, as long as you have enough backbone and you have that 50-pound braid, and as long as you're not like bombing casts in the giant weed flats where it's long casts. If it's close quarters, like a lighter rod of 50-pound does just fine for those frogs.
I think like I've had Randall Wallace on before, and he's such a good frog fisherman, and he throws that the Daiwa. It was the one with the AGS air guides. Like it really is. And even me, like my regular everyday frog rod is a 7-1, like the Icon cash and rod. I haven't had it for too long, but it's been really good. But you really want to spend some money on a good frog rod, because it's one of those techniques that, God, just throwing it will absolutely destroy you, especially
Yeah,
trying to twitch it.
yeah.
Like that's like some rods
Quantum.
you can.
Yeah, I used to be
Yes.
sponsored by Quantum back in the day, and they had a signature series Dean Rojas frog rod, and I
Um,
really did love that rod. I still have it, but it's a 7 foot, and it's a really weird rod where it's like all backbone, and then the tip is just super light. You go and like bend it, and it's just all backbone, but it has this really light tip. It's like an extra fast rod. It was really, I've never seen a rod like it. But it really
uh,
was well designed, and for the style of fishing that I do with a frog, and what he does too is yeah, it's done pretty well. I like that rod.
Colors, just a black, white, green kind of deal.
Yeah, you don't need to keep the Cara frog. That little bluegill Cara frog's pretty cool. It's hard to find a really good. There's not a lot of companies make a good looking bluegill frog. Like, I can't say Spro has a good looking bluegill color that I know of, anyways. I wish they did, but that Cara frog and the bluegill's good. Otherwise, just white, black, white and yellow, like some bullfrog. A lot of yellows and stuff like that can be good. Not like necessarily bright chartreuse, but kind of yellow green. One of my favorites actually is the old snag proof that I used to use was a brown one. I painted the belly white, and then I put some little black dots on it with a Sharpie, and I'd change out the legs to like brown and white legs, and that used to be my go-to back
Dang.
in the day.
The what? You want to give up the juice on some of his alterations you're doing?
Yeah,
Are you putting rattles in there, BBs to weigh it
sometimes I
down?
do that. I cut the legs and I put in like this clear. I wish I had one with me. I don't. I cut the legs off because the legs on the frog kind of come straight down like this. Like, this is the body of the frog and the legs come down. I actually cut the
Mhm.
legs off and make a tube so it goes across. So the legs actually come out like this and then bend rather
Huh.
than them coming down. The reason for that is when I'm walking it, and then you stop it, if the legs are coming down, it just, when you stop it, just does that. But the legs come out like this as you're walking it. It's the legs
Pivots better.
are bent, and then you stop, and they just, like, even after like 10-15 seconds, they're still like moving and expanding and trying to straighten out to the sides.
Hmm.
So that's
Like
another,
a
that's
secondary action.
yeah, just when you stop and pause it, those legs are still like moving out. And there's only a few companies that have them where the legs are completely out to the sides like that.
Hmm.
Um, but that was a modification I really did. Another thing, I changed out the hooks with like a extra wide gap EWG hook, frog hook, and another thing I'll do is on the nose of it, I'll get some like 30-pound braid. And I'll wrap it around the rubber on the nose, because a lot of times that's where it breaks, is like right in that nose. Like the rubber will split right there. And by tying some braid around that and putting some super glue, that's another modification that I do a lot.
Wow.
Uh, and I'd paint them up and stuff and change out the legs to different colors.
Do
Sometimes
you
I had
like
a
glue
rattle. Huh?
like that? Do you like glue Velcro to the top like the Boom Boom Frog?
Oh, what did he use that for again? I saw that and I remember it was a cool
It's supposed to
idea. I
be
forgot.
something where the teeth grab onto it.
Oh, okay. Where like the cert. That's right. Yeah. That's a cool idea. Yeah, where the top teeth like will catch on that Velcro, so it's harder for it to spit out. That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, that's right. That's Fred Romanis's frog, right?
Yeah, man,
Yeah.
I've like super glued the top to try to get more texture on it, and man, I've done all kind of dumb shit with a frog.
Yeah.
Yeah, like everything. Like I poke so many holes in them, then they hold water, and I've ruined it for you toying around with them.
Yeah, that's one thing. When they start, you don't want one where it starts leaking all that water into it and starts sinking. That's annoying for sure.
Yeah, you're squeezing it all the time.
Yeah.
Hey, do you ever throw the Strike King one, the pop and perch, or
Yeah.
the perch ones?
Not the perch. I've seen that. I found a Strike King. It wasn't a popping one. I didn't know what it was, and I found it. I don't know, somewhere. I forget where I was. I was just sitting on the surface there, and then I put it on and started catching fish on it right away. I'm like, oh, that's nice. Whenever I find a lure at a certain fishery, I can tell you how many times where I just tie on that lure and start catching fish. Um,
Wow.
but that striking one's a good one too. They make so many different frogs nowadays. But I guess
Yeah.
with the standards are the Spros and the Cara frogs, those would probably be, and then the old snag proofs are probably like my three favorites.
Are you boiling them or anything like that?
Mm-mm.
No,
No,
sauce them.
sometimes, yeah, sometimes they're, yeah, you definitely want the right hardness. Sometimes those Spros they're inconsistent, where sometimes you kind of squeeze them down, it's just right, and other times it's a little too stiff, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. So, what other top waters? The
We do toads.
toads. Yeah, toads are probably, honestly, probably my favorite. Like a top toad.
Yeah,
Man, I've got a real soft spot in my heart for a top toad.
they're good. I just started using those in Wisconsin. I was throwing that around a little bit. And what's the other one they make? The ribbit and then the top
Yeah.
toad. But the top toad's a really good one. Moves a lot of water. Another there's the horny toad, which is a pretty
Yeah.
popular one. I'll throw that a lot with a spring lock hook and uh, a 5/0 owner spring lock hook. Sometimes you can put just a little bit of weight, like a 16th ounce weight on the nose, just like Texas rig, a little bit, or use a little bit of a belly weighted
Swim
EWG,
bait.
or
Yeah.
yeah, just get a little bit of weight. That's a good one for those toads. A lot of times you can reel on those. Works really good for grass mats where it's really weedless. You can still cover a little bit of water. It has a little bit of action, and it's nice when you want to reel it, and then there's a little hole in the weeds or something like that, and then you can just let it kind of sink down in there. Um, Most times, if I'm using a toad, or not all the time, but there's just a handful of times where that was really the deal where you're reeling along the surface, and if you just keep reeling, they wouldn't hit it. But it's you reel it into an open area and then just let it kind of sink down. That's a good one to do. And all same thing. I'll throw that with braid, 40-pound braid typically. Um, the
Just
other one,
just so you can cast a little bit further, going
just getting
lighter braid.
solid hooks. Yeah, just getting solid hook sets with that with a toe, whether it's a frog, like a hollow belly frog, or a
Hmm.
toad. You can't, especially with a hollow belly frog, you cannot throw. You have to use braid. If you try to use
Yeah.
just straight fluorocarbon or mono, you will not have good results. Same thing, really, with those toads. I would say, unless it's just for some reason like very pretty open water. But when they grab it and you're around a lot of vegetation like that, and they make a turn or turn in that vegetation, you want no stretch in your line at all. Because a lot of times there'll be a little bend in your line. They'll be around some weeds. And even with the braid, sometimes you'll miss fish. It's a big part of missing fish when you're in those heavy grass mats, or you just want as solid a hook set as possible.
Speaking of missing them with a frog, do you have a? I'm sure it probably It's dependent on the structure of vegetation, but do you have a favorite backup? Like a comeback bait?
It's a fluke typically, I'd say,
Yeah.
more times than not, or Senko, depending on where you're at, I guess. But most of the time, a fluke. I'd say would be my number one backup bait, or
Follow up
something like
bait,
it.
not yeah,
Yeah,
not
follow up bait.
comeback.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
What ratio? Because I talked to I had Garrett Morgan on for too long, not too long ago, and he was talking about frogs. How often are you throwing like a smaller frog to a bigger one?
Those Cara frogs are about the smallest one. I have some of the small spros as well. And those work all right, but those Jackal Cara frogs are definitely on the smaller size, and I throw those a lot. Yeah, they work good. It
Like
just
50-50?
depends. Yeah, 50, yeah, I'd say 50-50, or at least 30%, third of the time between that one, the Spro frogs, style frog, whether it's the poppin or the regular one, or the old snag proof. The snag proof ones, I kind of put longer legs on those. I like those a little earlier in the year, like around the spawn. That's when I really like to use those ones that I modify.
Just
But
bigger profile?
yeah, I think it's just with the way the legs come out, and I use that more when I'm kind of dead sticking or just working it really slow
Yeah.
around bedfish and stuff like that. When it's, you stop it and those legs are still just like moving out really really slow, and something about that with the spawning fish around like cypress trees, those work good too.
Hmm.
Around docks.
All right. I, I think we got frogs. How about wake baits? That's definitely one that, I mean, I've thrown some of the bigger ones, but like the smaller ones, I've definitely not thrown those. So, what's a tell me about your wake baits?
Wake baits. Some of the best wake baits I like is a Rapala. I don't know what it's called. It's long skinny, almost looks like a jerk bait. That's a really good one that I've been throwing a lot, especially if there's like gizzard shad around. It's a Rapala. I forget what it is. Gerald Swindle uses it a lot. I saw him throwing it. It's got 3 treble hooks, a little feather tail. That's a really good one. And the other wake bait that I throw is the 6 cents like speed shad. They make
Speedway?
speed
Yeah.
wake. That's a good one. I got one of those in like a bluegill color, and I have a few other ones. They're just kind of like random mixing them up. Whoa! Oops, sorry. Am I still there?
Yeah, you're good.
Cool. Um, got some random one. Oh, what's that other one? It's a knockoff of something. I paint them up myself. I got them just from China. The Buzz Jet Junior. Who makes that? Evergreen.
No, that's depths.
Depths. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if it works. I got some knockoffs of those that I paint up myself. And that Buzz Jet Junior, I like a lot. Wake baits for the most part,
See,
I'll
I have some of
throw.
the bigger ones. I don't think I've ever caught a dang fish on one.
Really? Do you have the full
Yeah.
size or the small?
Yeah.
That little small
They're
one that I
big.
got. Yeah, it's a small. It's like less than 100 centimeters, like a 90, equal to like a 90 size Whopper Popper probably. I like
Mm.
that when it's just really finesse, like really, really finessey, dead calm. And I'll throw that. It just has like a slight little wiggle and flare, the little prop in the back kicks up a little bit of water. Um, I like that one just on straight mono, actually. Usually when I'm using that. Wake baits in general, they're not a lure you're going to be able to make like really long casts with for the most part. If
Yeah.
you do make a really long cast with a wake bait, you're going to have to lift your rod like way up like that a lot of times to get it going. What's going to happen is if you make a long cast and you're just working it regularly, it's not going to wake. It's going to go underneath the surface like a few inches. So most of the times when I'm using a wake bait, I'm using a little shorter rod and a little shorter cast, about say 50 feet or so, is 60 feet is about how long your casts are going to be at the long, at the farthest. Um,
Why
but
a wake bait? Just like I'm trying to think of a situation I would throw a wake bait. Just I guess submerged grass or murd. Yeah.
everything, I like it along riprap a lot. Like it's really calm
Oh.
along riprap, that little Buzz Jet Junior. I'll throw it like right up against the shore. It's like a buzz bait or something like that. It's just making a little too much noise or commotion. That's something that's working good. Usually it's, yeah, when they don't want, yeah, if a buzz bait or one of those other baits is just too loud for them. They want something just really subtle. That's when I'll throw those wake baits.
Hmm. So more like flat calm.
More calm, yeah. Very rarely, like, I can't even think of a time really where I've thrown a wake bait when there's much
Mm.
chop on the water. Um, Another one that I throw is like the bigger wake baits, like the um, what's it not? I want to say MC Hammer, but that's not it. The what is it called? Something Hammer, MC Hammer.
I don't know.
Uh, or a slammer, RS slammer. Fuck,
I don't know that one.
I forget. It's a bigger wake bait, like a 6-7 inch. I used
Hmm.
to throw that a lot. I got a black one that I throw that a lot. It's good.
How about Devil's Horse? I don't even know what category that is. Is that
Devil's
wake bait?
horse. Uh, no, I do have some of those and prop bait. It's just like a prop bait. They also make like
Yeah,
those. That's something I throw a little bit, mostly just when I'm down in
Florida.
Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's other times where they make those other little prop baits, like the shorter. The Devil's Horse is kind of a long, skinnier one with two props on it. Makes a lot of noise, and it's just one of those things where certain parts of the country they just really like that. Typically in Florida, maybe in Texas too. I've
Is
heard,
it
but
just like pinfish forage? Is why they?
that's part of it. I've heard that. Yeah. Um, yeah, I've definitely heard that before. A lot of times those other prop baits, like the what's it called? They make these little bluegill ones when the bluegill are spawning.
Mm,
I know like Lucky Craft makes Kelly Jordan makes a signature series one that I've used a little bit. And there's another one actually. I don't know if it's a copy of that one or what. It's Academy, the H2O Express or whatever. They had this little prop bait that I've caught a lot of fish on that. It's just a small, like 75 size bait, and typically just works around the bluegill spawn when you see it, especially when you see little bluegill like coming up to the surface and just like popping the surface a little bit and coming down, popping the surface. Something that you're going to work a little bit slower, just like pop, pop, and let it sit, almost like a popper. It's very similar to popper, just makes a little bit more ruckus and noise, and the profile is a little bit different than a popper. But
gotcha.
um, yeah,
I guess I guess, and then what's left is everything else, like like a gizmo,
yeah,
duck,
yeah. A duck.
who
I can't say I've
JDM
used a duck.
stuff.
They make like spiders, that big savage or something. Somebody makes a big
Yeah,
spider.
but lunker hunt.
The Unker Hunt. Yeah, yeah. I've never used that. I bet
I
it
don't think they
works.
make anything worth throwing.
No. What else they got? Little dragonflies. Yeah. I think we covered most of the categories. I'd say. I'm trying
Do
to
you
think if
throw any of
there's.
that crazy stuff? Do you have like one in your box that's like, this is like, well, I mean, I don't want your juice, but you know what I'm saying? Like, do you have something crazy in your box nobody else is throwing?
That's a top water bait. I got some weird stuff that I make, but not that's a top water bait. I stick to most of this stuff is pretty tried and true. Stuff uh, that's worked for a lot of people. Whether it's
Yeah.
all those lures I listed off, as far as in each little category, like the poppers have like the little kind of the ones that aren't super mainstream or whatever you want to call them, like the yellow magic or the little Iovino popper, or with the walking baits, like the Vixens always, uh, all those are like known. If you're hardcore tournament anglers,
Yeah.
mostly heard about those baits, or whether it's the the pencil popper, like the evergreen shower blow. There's always like
Hmm.
kind of those random top water baits that are not your standard, just like Strike King, or whatever kind of baits. There's definitely some, and there's some other ones that I'm sure I don't know of too. Some Japanese ones, or there's so many different, especially hard baits and soft bait, just lures in general. It's pretty hard to try them all at this point.
Yeah.
But
It's like it's so hard to get too far out of the box on stuff because we only have so much room.
yeah, and it's also a matter of like, do I really want to mess with these kind of abstract topwater baits where it's going to be, you know, if I need to get one, it's going to be hard to get, you know. That's
Yeah.
the other thing is I like kind of, like I said, using the tried and true stuff, and I don't always stick to, because I'm not sponsored by any lure companies. A lot of lures I make myself. You know, I get the I'm able to use a variety of baits and aren't stuck to like, oh, just this brand or just this brand, which is nice, especially for hard baits, because it's hard to find a hard bait company where you can
Makes
just,
it all.
yeah, where it makes it all. They do, a lot of times they do make it all, but you know, there's other times where just like, whether it's the evergreen shower blow or the yellow mat, you know, where there is something that possibly works better, and I'd rather have, you know, the opportunity to use those baits and be committed to one brand.
Have you ever thrown the Hellraiser? How about that one?
No,
The
what is
Z-Man deal?
that? What is that? I've heard of it.
It's, it's the Z-Man deal where it's got like almost like a metal blade on the front, kind of like a clacker,
That's
and
right.
that's long and skinny, and the back sits in the water, and it
Okay,
kind of goes side to side.
interesting. Have you thrown
Uh,
it? I haven't.
no, no.
Huh.
Not that it doesn't work. I've just
I'm
never
sure
thrown one.
there's a time and place, yeah, for all those. Like I'm sure there's times where they say, especially at lakes, get a lot of pressure and stuff too, where they see a lot. You know,
Yeah, something different.
summertime, and they're seeing all kinds of topwater baits. Sometimes those random ones like that can really make a difference. I mean, the one
Yeah.
lure I will actually that we haven't talked about that I like throwing is it's a bigger swim bait. It's called a lunker punker. I used to throw it. It's been out for a while. I don't think they make them anymore, but it's a big. They make a 6 and an 8 inch. It's a hand carved, just like wood bait, walking bait, and I've caught a lot of fish. I was throwing it this year. It's been a while. I threw it a lot in California, especially for like big stripers, and caught some really big bass on it as well. And once I moved out to Tennessee, I've been throwing it around, and it wasn't until I was at the not Harris Chase Seminole. Is it Florida? Is it Seminole? Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
on the border
Seminole.
there.
Yeah, like in May, the Hobie at Seminole. Um, I tied that bait on, and they were freaking crushing that thing. I took off the hooks, and in pre-fish, I was, oh my god, I had so many like 5 to 8 pounders on that thing. Just yeah, I
Uh,
took the hooks off, so I didn't get a hook them, and then tournament time comes, and yeah, they weren't eating. I got one big one. I got like a 7 pounder on it. That was the only one I got, but some of those bigger top waters, especially that one was a big staple for me back in the day, um, and yeah, it doesn't have any rattles. That's the thing, is it was working good
uh,
at a lot. It's just all just wood, no rattles, no noise. It moves a lot of water. Does really wide. You can just pop it hard, and it'll glide like 2 feet this way and then like 2 feet that way if you just kind of knock it hard enough as you're walking it. Yeah, Lunker Punker Junior. It's one of my favorite top waters for sure.
how about rats?
I do, you know, I would like, yeah, I guess it's the MS Slammer. That's what it is. MS Slammer. That's kind of like a similar, bigger wake bait. I haven't thrown
The
any of the
plunker, yeah.
rats, but that MS Slammer is pretty similar, like profile, and that's a wake bait. That was the one I was trying to think of. I got a few of those, and I've caught some big fish on those as well. I need to get some rats. It's just too hard to throw to get everything, I guess. But those
Yeah.
rats, some of I've seen, you know, I've seen them. They sure look good. I'm sure they have their time and place.
Nick Dyer, your second place guy, that's
Mhm.
his favorite bait, a rat.
Is it cool?
Yeah, it's amazing how much he loves to throw on things, and the collection that he has is pretty ridiculous. Like he has multiple rat rods just
No
for
way.
rats. Yeah.
Dang.
Well, he
Okay.
fishes down. He's in Georgia and he fishes for
Mm.
shoalies with big rats.
Gotcha. The shoalies eat those too. That's awesome. I've only got to
Yeah.
fish for those a couple of times down in the Flint River, but they're fun. They eat big for, yeah, being a fish with a smaller mouth, like a spotted bass or a smallmouth. You know, they eat big baits. I say even more so than the other two. You know, bigger baits than the smallmouth or the spots. They like big baits down there. My buddy
Yeah.
throws big swim baits and has had some good luck.
Hmm.
But
All right. Well, I think we hit it all. What I want to give
Cool.
you a chance to shout out anybody that makes fishing easier for you. Who you got? Besides your rod, I still got to try out one of
You
your
do.
Snyder
You'll like it.
snipers.
I've
Yeah.
had a couple of years with it now, and I love that rod. I'm not just saying that. All my sponsors here:
Man's prepared.
Torpedo, iRod, Wilderness Systems, Dakota Lithium, Music City Outdoors, Catch Outdoors, Torpedo, and Yak Attack, and all the tournament organizations, Bassmaster, KBF, and Hobie. Definitely appreciate just opportunities they create for having these tournaments for us to fish. And I also like to thank you, Daniel, for having me on and let me chat about some top water.
Anytime, man. Well, I appreciate you being on, and I appreciate y'all listening, and we'll see y'all again next week.
See you guys.